Akko is back at it again with another release of an aluminum 75%. But wait, this time it's something quite different. For months I've been talking about how companies should change up the scene in the budget segment of mechanical keyboards. I've been exhausted by the numerous gasket-mounted, aluminum exploded 75%s out in the market. Don't get me wrong, they're great, but I wanted somewhat more variety in the budget end of custom mechanical keyboards. And I also wanted something more unique. For 130 to 170 US, will this top 75 suffice my wants? Let's find out. The Akko ACR Top 75 is a compact 75% keyboard housed in either an acrylic or an aluminum case, as what I have here sent over by Akko for an honest review. What surprised me is that Akko, rather than sticking with the norm of gasket mounts and exploded layouts, they went compact 75 and top mount for this particular keyboard. If you aren't familiar with top mounts, it's kind of a niche mounting solution in the budget end, but it's much more prominent in the high-end scene, just like the TGR JNV2 and the Mod007s. More details on that soon. For now, let's see what comes in the box. For this build, we'll be using Akko Palm Silvers, which are fast actuating, full palm switches. Moving on with the top 75, opening the rather tall box, we start off with the board's manual, the PCB housed in an anti-static bag, the FR4M brass plate, and the Coiled USB Type-C cable. Underneath all of that is a box containing all the screws that we'll be needing for the build. Next to that are the plate mount tabs, a keycap and switch puller, and lastly is the Allen key and screwdriver combo to be able to open up the board. Going deeper inside the box, we see the plate and PE foam, which should change the sound profile of the board quite drastically. And lastly is the star of the show, the aluminum top and bottom case for the top 75. In the middle, you could also see the daughter board and silicone insert for the board that we'll be adding and removing later on. The top 75 Alu version comes in this nice space gray color, though it's got a pinkish hue compared to my 007s. On the front, we could see the compact 75% layout with navigation keys on the right, function keys on the top, and a blocker to separate the arrow keys from the bottom row. I much prefer this layout as opposed to exploded, as this saves more space while being not too cramped like the Keychron K2. This layout is similar to the TGR Tomo, Mod007s, and Akko's own ACR Pro 75. And speaking of the Pro 75, fun fact, this PCB is actually labeled for the ACR Pro 75. Looks like Akko decided to reuse it for this board as well. Moving on, the board is enclosed in a CNC aluminum block with rounded corners on each side, chamfered so that it wouldn't be too sharp for the fingers. The sides are flat, having no place to lift it easily, while the back removes the sticker on the center and leaves it with the ACR Top 75 badge on the bottom right, 4 rubber feet on each side, and the 12 screws surrounding the board. I wish they added a weight on this as the back looks kind of bland, but I do understand that it will add to the cost of the board. Still, I think it would be a nice addition to the second version. I didn't encounter any CNC mismarks or reflectivity issues with the 2-piece case on mine. Last bit of note with the construction, I wish Akko could offer this board in more colors, as this is such a nice design for a keyboard. The Mod007s V2's overall profile is much bigger compared to the top 75. This is due to the fact that the mod chose to use a 75% exploded layout, whereas the top 75 opted for the compact 75 look, with the blocker on the bottom. I much prefer this look as it compresses the board a bit more, providing more space for the mouse on my right. It also looks better aesthetic-wise in my opinion. The front lip on the top 75 is higher than the 007s, though in use, I hardly notice the difference at all. The typing angle is also increased by 1 to 2 degrees versus the 007s. Again, something I haven't noticed at all being a hurdle in daily use. And last point of comparison, as opposed to the angular sides of the 007s, the Top 75 inherits the design of its acrylic cousin, having a simple no-frills designs on the side. The edges, just like the 007s, are chamfered, but with rounded corners this time, making it look much slicker in my opinion. It doesn't look like an Akko board at all. The PCB is thankfully south-facing, and it seems like with their new releases, Akko is moving towards having more south than north-facing PCBs, and that's a good thing. It has screw-in support and has a daughter board for the Type-C port. Sadly for the RGB fans out there, only the acrylic version of this keyboard has perky RGB weirdly. And there's still no BIOS support, but Akko has their own software for key mapping. The acrylic version of the Top 75 has the brass plate included, while the Alu version also adds an FR4 plate, and you know for sure I'm testing them both out. The included stabs for this board were prelude plate mounts that perfectly fit their plate. Akko also added that they are making the plate files open source so that we can outsource our own plate materials if we so wished. I find that with the brass plate, it produces a clacky sound profile, but it's a bit too much for me. The FR4 on the other hand is neutral. We'll get much more deeper on this later. For now, let's talk about its mounting style. The Top 75 utilizes a top mount structure with your choice of adding silicone O-rings or not. Top mount design basically means that the plate is screwed into the top case, making it have a uniform sound profile and feel on each row. The catch is that even with the flexier plate like FR4, this is stiffer compared to a gasket mount with an aluminum plate. Whether that will hinder you from buying this is up to you, but from my testing, I actually prefer the typing feel of this board compared to the 007s. To me, the typing feel is consistent per row, and while I can't judge it sound-wise compared to a gasket mount, paired up with a nice linear switch like the Palm Silvers or Gateron Oil Kings, this to me sounds like marbles. The Mod007s overall gives more bounciness on each key press compared to the Top 75, as it has the gasket mount design suspending the plate and PCB in between the foreign gaskets. This also allows for a softer key press feel, which puts less strain on your fingers. Keep in mind that the bounce is much more seen in the middle alpas than on the edges. Going back to the Top 75, for those thinking that this might feel and sound like a tray mount, it doesn't. Tray mounts have the screws all over the plate, in turn giving it an inconsistent feel, while top mounts put the screw holes on the outside perimeter of the plate, overall making it much more consistent in the typing experience. Now that's out of the way, let's start building this keyboard. With tons of options out of the box, I'll only be showing one build time-lapse, but will include the sound test for the other 8 build variations of this keyboard. I started with a brass plate, Akko Palm Silvers, and absolutely no silicone or O-ring in sight. This is to test the pinginess of the case, and how it handles it. So without further ado, let's start. I started by placing the plate and switches to the PCB. Keep in mind that the brass plate is quite a fingerprint magnet, so take good care of it while mounting your switches. With absolutely no foam in sight, I'm excited to see how this performs. After adding those components, I then mounted the PCB, plate and switches to the board itself by screwing the plate to the top piece. Keep in mind that there's also extra screws in the box if you ever lose one in the middle of the building process. After screwing the plate and PCB on the top case, the last thing I did was screwing the back of the case to the top using the 12 hex screws. And finally, I mounted some Yonk Hub keycaps on top. And don't forget the Bucky's Artisan. And here's how it sounded. The Akko Palm Silvers are some real clacky switches. Paired up with a brass plate, this can really be a loud keyboard. Keep in mind that I also tried the board with the other plate and foam configurations, and will be publishing a separate full video on that. But here's a quick rundown. With the brass plate and nothing at all, as you heard, it's quite pingy and hollow, but not as pingy as the 007s stock. With the silicone insert only, it removed the hollowness and reduced the pinginess, but it deadens the sound a bit more. With the silicone O-ring only, it removed the pinginess, but it still had a lot of hollowness. With both the silicone and O-ring mounted, it removed both the hollowness and pinginess. I'd suggest adding polypill as opposed to the insert to reduce the hollowness but not deaden the sound. With all the silicone and foam, it has the Jelly Epoch and PE foam sound signature. Moving on with the FR4 plate, with no inserts or O-rings, it's only hollow. With the silicone insert only, it removed the hollowness but deadens the sound. With the silicone O-ring only, it still had a lot of hollowness, but the O-ring added more bounce to the board. With both of them, it removed the hollowness, but the insert deadens the sound. Again, my suggestion is to add polypill to reduce the hollowness but not deaden the sound. Lastly, with all the foams, it has that PE foam sound signature. From all those sound tests, my favorite config has to be the FR4 plate, all foam. It sounded quite similar to the QK65 I built way back, while having the typing feel of a top mount. I tape modded the back of the PCB with 2 layers of masking tape. And lastly, I also changed out the switches to lubed and film Gateran Oil Kings for the final build, courtesy of Kurt Bro Switches. If you're planning to build a keyboard and live in the PH, use code KURTCTech to have a 5% off on their Shopee store. Anyways, here's the build. The Akko ACR Top 75 is such a unique keyboard for its price, especially in a bracket dominated by gasket-mounted, exploded 75% keyboards. While Akko has definitely played it safe with their past releases and stuck to what works, I'm really happy that unlike other budget companies, they're going beyond, dipping their toes in new territory. By far, this board has been a delight to mod and use. Its mounting system, its typing feel, and sound is unlike any other on this price segment. For $170 US, you can't go wrong buying this keyboard. If you want to try out the top mount feel and want something different from the rest, you should focus your eyes on this. With some mods to remove the pinging, this could be a great entry to top mounts for you. As looking online, the cheapest top mount board I found is the Freebird TKL, that roughly sells for $250 US. If you already have a decent collection of boards and haven't tried out top mount yet, or are delighted with the design and layout of this keyboard, and by all means, this could be your next keyboard. Whether I choose this or the 007s, that's another story. For now, I'd like to ask you, what plate and foam config did you like the best? And would you rather get this or another board at this price range? Let me know down below. Once again, I'm Johan J. Benraba, and I'll see you in the next video.